Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Valerie Z, the founder of Spiritual Cardio, a 10-week group coaching program that teaches women how to make peace with their inner truth and practice self-love, where we heal in community by interrogating our inner demons until they lose power over us. I'm bringing you the powerful spiritual practices that helped birth my transformation because I want the same for you. I'm going to teach you how to build a love story with yourself and your inner child. So let's go. I'm sure you guys know by now how much I love doing this show. I pour my heart and soul into each episode to create a ripple effect of healing and self-awareness in the world. And you guys can help me make that little ripple into a wave. So I ask that if you find value in this episode, or if you had any aha moments, or if the show helps you navigate your life in a more positive direction, please share the show. It would mean so much to me if you would do that. And now let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming back and tuning in to the Spiritual Cardio podcast. This is episode 19. I'm bringing you guys something different this year. I want to do more collaborations. So I thought, what better way to share the impact of spiritual cardio than bringing some of my previous clients on the show to talk about their personal transformation. In this episode, I talk with Elizabeth Gamino from Charlotte, North Carolina. She signed up for spiritual cardio a few years ago when she was living in Seattle. At the time, she was struggling with depression, anxiety, and unaddressed childhood trauma. We talk about the trials and tribulations that accompany our family dynamics, acceptance of others, how she finally felt empowered to own her story, heal her shame, and how she manifested multiple job offers as a result of releasing stuck energy, and the power of collective healing. The first time she told her story to a group was in spiritual cardio. So she shares how healing in community propelled her deeper into her transformational journey. Since then, she's moved across the country to be closer to her family. She started a new job that she really enjoys, and she's even dating again. So let's get into it.
I'm so glad you reached out. We haven't connected in a long time.
I know, since the program, but I've been watching you through social media, so I see that you are doing really good. You moved back home, right?
Yeah, I've moved back to be closer to my family, which was something I didn't think could happen a long time ago, but it's been really good.
Why didn't you think it would happen?
I think I just had a lot of unresolved issues with them, like unaddressed childhood traumas. And I just thought, well, if I don't ever acknowledge them, I'll just ignore it and it'll go away. And that's just not how things work. So ignoring it, the problems don't make them go away. But after I was able to address some things and really look back at a lot of childhood issues, I feel like I've gotten to a really good place now.
Yeah, I remember after the program, you messaged me and you told me that you decided to move back home and confront some of the stuff that you just had been putting off, really. And that decision had something to do with the work that you did with the program with spiritual cardio. So that was exciting to hear because sometimes we want to run away from our problems, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think after college and even growing up, I just felt like I didn't really fit in. Like I didn't feel like my family really understood me. And I didn't really like where I grew up. And so I just felt like, okay, it's time to start all over. And during COVID, my dad had a stroke and I still didn't move home. I still didn't feel ready. And he was able to recover, but it was still hard just thinking this could happen again. I felt like it was an opportunity to really face some of my previous issues and childhood things. And yeah, like I've done a lot of work on those things, which has helped.
Some of the stuff that we talked about during spiritual cardio, I mean, family comes up a lot because of, well, childhood and the people that we grew up with, right?
Hmm.
So throughout the program, one of the things that comes up often is family because of childhood. And sometimes I know that I left home at 18 because of the trauma and just a lot of the stuff that was going on there wasn't healthy. And I finally was at an age where I could run away. As we go through life and as we go through our healing journey, we recognize that we're carrying this burden of resentment or whatever it is. It can be anger, it can be resentment, it can be just unresolved emotion from all of the stuff that we went through, and we recognize that it's fucking holding us back. That requires energy.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I've been in therapy on and off since I was probably 18. In college, I just felt like I was having a hard time adjusting. And I thought, okay, this is probably a good time to go see someone. And probably in my 20s, I had a therapist try to talk about my childhood and family dynamics. And I just dismissed it. And I was like, oh, like, it's like, I'm here because I'm stressed about work. We are not here to talk about my childhood. That has nothing to do with it. And it wasn't until, 10 years later or something where I finally felt, okay, like I know there's unresolved stuff that is showing up in my daily life. And spiritual cardio was one of the first places where I mean, it was the first place where I talked about it with a group of people. And I was just really scared to do that. Like before joining the group, I had told my one therapist, I had never even told any of my friends, even of my previous therapists. Like I finally told one and I thought, okay, well, that's it. I told one person and that's going to resolve everything. And it still wasn't enough. I was like, oh, I just felt like I wasn't owning my story. And I think that's what we really worked on in spiritual cardio was really opening up about it and then realizing, okay, has shaped my life. And it doesn't mean that it's going to always be a problem, but it is there and I have to acknowledge it.
Yeah. Owning our story is one of the hardest things we'll ever do, but it opens up a whole new world within us that allows light in, right? Invites joy in, and then allows us to transform. But if we're not taking the time to do it, then we're using the energy to suppress that. The beauty about doing this work and why I feel so passionate about it is because it opens up a whole new world for you to have a different kind of life, for you to be like the architect of your destiny, right? To be more tapped into your intuition, your desires, your values. Like there's so many pluses in doing the work. So that makes me really happy. And I had this whole like lineup of questions, but we just went straight into
Oh yeah, no, no worries. Yeah, I did take some notes and I reviewed some of the things we talked about, just so I was like, okay, so I can remember everything.
Yeah. Yeah, we just went deep diving in, but that's my nature. That's how I am. I like to go deep right away. So
Yeah.
not surprised. So we'll start from the beginning. Let's just start out with who you are, how you came across the program, what attracted you to it initially, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I can't remember where I found your program exactly, but during
It was
COVID.
on the Amigas. I
Oh,
remember you told me it was on the
yes.
Amigas. We All Grow Amigas platform.
Okay, yes, and I'm still on there. I still do some other programs and other things on there. Yeah, so during COVID, I ended up just going through a big episode of depression, and I think I had a lot of unresolved issues, trauma and childhood events that I wasn't addressing. And then being at home and being alone, just like everything felt really heavy and really big. And I was in therapy, individual therapy, and I was taking medication and it still felt not like it wasn't enough. Like I was still doing all the things and I still felt like I was lacking a community. And it was hard to bring up these things with my friends. It just kind of felt like it's going to be really hard to talk to them about these traumatic things. And they've been my friends for years and I've never told them this. So I didn't really know how to navigate that. So it was a really lonely space. And then I came across your program. And then some of the things that really appealed to me were you're Latina, you understand some of the cultural issues and some of the things about, not wanting to talk about this with your family and your community. And I'm not even sure if I ever brought it up with my parents, some of the things that they did before doing a lot of the inner work. I never brought up like how they made me feel or anything because I remember growing up, my feelings were dismissed. I would just say, I'm really stressed or I'm really anxious or I feel really sad. And they're like, well, you have nothing to worry about. You have food and you have a house and all of your basic needs are taken care of. And that's kind of how I always felt like within the Latino culture, that it felt just like, we don't talk about our feelings. You get your basic needs met, you have a house, you have food, and then everything else is just hush hush.
Swept under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I think being able to find a space that it's like, okay, well, I think you'll be able to understand some of the cultural things. And then having a safe space where I could share was really appealing. And so I think that's really what attracted me to the program when I initially found out about it.
Yeah. And most of my clients, I don't mean to alienate anybody here, but 90% of my clients have been Latinas. And I think it's a cultural thing. I think growing up in our culture, I don't know if this is the case for other cultures though. Like, I'm not in that space enough to know if they also sweep things under the rug. I suspect that other cultures do that too.
Yeah, I'm sure. But it was just hard to explain it to some of my friends because my family and Latinos are sometimes very blunt and then sometimes just want to not talk about anything at all. So it was just really hard where I was like, oh, like my parents would be very blunt about, oh, you don't look nice today, or you've been putting on weight, or just
Yes.
certain things. But then when I would be like, oh, well, I want to talk about like maybe why I'm emotionally eating or why like things are really stressful in college. And maybe this is why I put on weight. Like that wasn't ever discussed. That was never like an open conversation. So it was hard to explain that to people.
Yeah, that's why spiritual cardio I feel is so powerful, is because we create the space to be seen and heard and be vulnerable, right? Because a lot of us can't even be vulnerable with our own families
Right.
because they don't have the emotional capacity to like even hold space for us. Like they just can't.
Yeah, and it was hard. I just didn't feel like I had that space where with my friends, I didn't think some of them would understand, or maybe they would feel, I don't know, that I didn't trust them because we've been friends for a long time. Well, they would ask me, why didn't you bring this up, when this was happening? And I don't know. Like, I don't know why. I just tried to ignore it. And then at some point, just as like a volcano, it erupted. And then I just felt like I couldn't function anymore. Just being at home during COVID, working from home and being really isolated, all of the things just started to get bigger and bigger, and I couldn't ignore them anymore.
Isn't it interesting? You said something right now that is really important, is the volcano erupted. Because one of the things we talk about in spiritual cardio is speaking our truth. Like that volcano needs to erupt. Those emotions need to come out. Whatever you're holding inside needs to come out and be expressed. That's the inner child that needs to be seen and heard, or else it's just swirling and swirling and swirling and swirling within us. So I'm glad that you said that. And I'm really glad that you decided to join us in spiritual cardio, because there's nothing more powerful than taking the time to work on yourself, to do your own personal growth work. It's just really powerful to do that. And it's beautiful to see the aha moments, like as we are sitting there and I'm giving you guys a story, and to see your face light up because you have this like aha moment or this breakthrough moment. I think that's beautiful. And so tell me about what aha moments or breakthroughs maybe you had throughout the program.
I mean, a lot of it was feeling that sense of community where, like, being able to hear your story and realizing there were some similarities, and other people that shared, there were similarities. A lot of childhood and family trauma, things that happen. And then, like, for you sharing your story, that you were able to grow from that. Just showing, like, where you started. And then, I probably had some of the same coping skills. Like I was drinking a lot at some point in my life and just like trying to ignore all of that, but then realizing it gets better, or like seeing you succeed. And then being able to just have that community with other people to feel like, okay, I'm not the only one that's gone through something like this. And we could
Yeah.
all share. And nobody was judgmental. Everybody was really open. And I just never thought that could happen. I was like, well, I'm going to go to therapy, and I talked to my therapist, and that's it. She's the only person who can ever know any of these secrets. And since then, I've been able to open up to other people, and I think it has really helped. And it depends on like how much I want to share and at what point, but feeling really comfortable with, okay, this is my story. These are some of the things that have happened and have shaped the decisions that I've made and who I am today.
Amazing. Beautiful. And that's why the Pact of Values at the beginning of the program, something that I don't know if you remember the Pact of Values that I read at the start, is here you can share as much or as little as you want. Like, I want women to feel as comfortable to share very little. I don't want somebody to feel obligated or kind of forced to share more than what they're comfortable with. That makes everybody feel immediately comfortable, because I know that everybody comes from different walks of life. Some people might want to share a lot, and we need to put a timer on them because, like,
Yeah.
like they talk a lot, and other people might want to share as well. So with some people, you need to put a timer, and then with others, it's like if you just want to say your name and where you're from, like that's fine. I don't want people to feel forced. So I'm glad that you took the group program, because there's so much collective healing, like just hearing other women's stories. The power of storytelling and collective healing, being in a space where everybody has permission to be vulnerable if they want to, or to just sit there and listen if that's what they choose to do.
Yeah, and yours is the first program I ever did with that was a group, and that was all Latina. I've done other group therapy and other programs, but it's never been like that where I was like, "Oh, you really get it. Like I don't have to explain all these other things about my parents or the culture or like it was so nice to like be able to share and be able for people to understand. But yeah, I had never experienced anything like that because I had been journaling on my own and, thinking about things by myself and processing, with my own therapist. But it's a very different healing in community. And I just had never experienced that. And it was so nice at the time where it's like, okay, I definitely felt like I was making progress.
Yay, good. Which practice do you think impacted you the most, or which practices do you think that you enjoyed the most?
I think one of the first journaling ones you gave us was to write our story out. And then we were able to share it if we wanted to, or however much you wanted to. But just being able to like write it out for someone else to read or for someone else to think about, like for me to kind of disconnect from it, where it's like, here's my life, here are the things that have happened in a more like kind of fact based way and not have as much emotional connection to it. Because before I felt a lot of shame when I would think about me as a small child, or I didn't have a lot of control and I didn't have a lot of power back then. But being able to write it out and read it, and I was like, okay, I could have more empathy for myself. And then I think I shared most of it or all of it. And that was so healing because I had never done that with the group and I had never written it all out from when issues started. Very just like, here's what happened, and not feeling shame or anger or any sort of things in the moment. Later on, yeah, there's things that came up, but
Yeah.
that practice was really good.
Yeah, that was the self-inquiry. It's so important, because what we're doing throughout our lives is we're carrying the shame, we're carrying these stories within us, and we're pushing them down because we tend to think, well, everybody has trauma, everybody has something, and everybody's just going through life. But the thing is that it's weighing us down, and it manifests in certain behaviors, maybe some certain character defects that we don't like. Maybe it's creating insecurity, right? Because we're carrying this burden of shame. And so story needs to be acknowledged. Like instead of being suppressed and drowned or watered down, however it is that you tend to suppress it or distract from it, when you are doing that, you're running from it. And so therefore it holds power over you. But when you confront it by doing the self inquiry, then you're slowly taking your power back because now you're running towards it. That is very liberating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely had a lot of shame where it's like I can never tell any of my friends or anyone that I know. I mean, at the time I was dating someone and I had never told him any of the things. I was like, oh well, like that was when I was a child. Like that doesn't affect me now. That was 30 whatever years ago. I always thought like, well, that was so long ago. That is not who I am now. But it was just really running away from it and having all this shame surrounded from those experiences that really limited me.
Absolutely. I just want to take a moment just to let that sink in because I carried shame for many, many years too. So I know exactly how that feels. I am overjoyed that you trusted me and spiritual cardio with your process of trying to release some of that and trying to heal some of that. Because it transformed your life, right?
Oh
It's
yeah.
transformative to make the decision to commit to some sort of personal growth. I think spiritual cardio, the work is from a spiritual perspective because a lot of it you do like in prayer, meditation, journaling. So it's all on you. I just teach you how to do it. But it's really personal growth. Do you really want to grow? Do you really want to transform your life?
Yeah. And yeah, the group part was very nice. It was some accountability. And because you did give journaling prompts and different activities we could do, and then checking in with each other. When you're just doing it by yourself, it's easy to dismiss and say, I'll try again next week, or I'll pick this up at some point later. But when you're with a group and you want to share and you want to like hear other people's experiences, I felt I had more follow through.
Yeah. And that makes sense because you know that you're going to get together the following week because you want to be able to contribute something meaningful to the discussion, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of accountability. And that's another question that I had for you was what do you think about the duration of the program? Because it was 10 weeks.
Yeah, I thought it was a good amount of time and it was good to get to know everyone and that helped build some more safety and consistency because I think if it was shorter, I don't know if I would have opened up as much. But you're also very good because you shared a lot of your story, which was really helpful. And I think that was things that I had never experienced before because when you go to therapy by yourself, your therapist doesn't share about their own personal life. They're trying to really help you think about your stuff. But I had never really been in a space where someone had talked about their trauma and their issues and then the growth and the outcome from that.
And that's another reason why spiritual cardio is so powerful is because it's relatable. I'm not just saying, here, go do this, and then we're going to talk about it. It's like, let me share with you how this particular practice helped me. And because this is what I've been through, this is what I had to release, this is what I had to excavate. I know that if I've been through some shit, other women have been through some shit, right? And how can I help them? Really early on in my healing journey, I wanted to start a group to talk about our traumas. And I didn't start it back then because I didn't want to get together and commiserate about our insecurities or our traumas or what happened to us. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be meaningful and I wanted it to provide a path to move us forward. And it's so interesting the way the universe works, Elizabeth, because I've always been a writer. I've been journaling since the age of 12. And along my personal growth journey, I was documenting everything I was doing to heal because I was desperate for self love. So when I first started the journey and then wanting to start a group, but it was just like a baby idea. And then as the transformation got bigger and bigger, just kind of snowballed, right? Then I wrote a book proposal. And then when I wrote the book proposal is when I was getting mentored by Hay House. And when they read my book proposal, they were like, you need to teach this. Like, now. Women need this now. That's how spiritual cardio was born. It was a book proposal. So the universe works in these like very beautiful ways because I never, the dream was to write a book, but like now I'm teaching the contents of the book that is yet to come. That's still in the works.
The other thing that I think has really impacted me, because I have moved and I've had to make new friends and I've started a new job, but I also think that now when I've met new people, I've tried to be more open, because I do feel like all of us have issues and we've all experienced insecurities and different levels of problems that we've all had in life. Whereas like before with my friends, I was like, oh, I can never talk about these things. These are messy things in life. We can't ever discuss these. But now I have been a lot more open with people and, opening up about anxiety or depression or some trauma, just, depending on the level of friendship, but being able to talk about those things and really own my story, where I do think it has deepened my friendships and relationships so much more than before.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that's one of the things that I think doing this work does. It helps us become so confident with being vulnerable. Of course, we have to also recognize the level of friendship or the audience, right? We don't just want to express our vulnerability to just anybody. But if we're comfortable enough and it's a safe person or a safe space, the fact that we now have built this confidence to be vulnerable with the right people is huge, because that's something that we weren't doing before, because I think the shame just kind of kept all of that locked in because of the insecurity we feel.
Oh, yeah. There was so much shame that I felt like I could never tell anybody any of these things, because they're going to think less of me, or they're going to think I should have tried harder or said something or done something differently. And it was just always that those thoughts were always in my mind, like, it's all my fault. It's something, it was, even if I was 6 years old, it was still my fault that I should have done something.
I can relate. And until we speak our truth, we're not going to hear the words, hey, it wasn't your fault. But it's just taking that first step and making a decision to work on ourselves.
Yeah. And just even for me, like hearing my story out loud, being able to share it and just hearing it out loud made me realize, oh, there are so many things that weren't my fault. There are so many things I had no control over. And just like being able to have it live outside of my head gave me so much more power. Because when it was in my head and inside, just all of the thoughts were like, well, it's the shame and the anxiety, all of it just spiraled together. Whereas when it felt outside, I was able to have a little bit more distance and a little bit more understanding, and just feeling like, okay, I'm hearing other people's stories. When other people shared, I never thought like, oh, well, you could have done this or you should have done this. Like there was never any of that judgment. And so being able to share and hear my own story out loud also was able to release me from some of that judgment that I had towards myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's important to recognize that this person that you are holding this shame for or being like merciless with is your inner child. If you knew that that was happening to your like a child today right now, let's say, you would feel for them. You would want to nurture them and make them feel safe and loved, and but then we don't do that for ourselves? No, we need to change that. And here's the thing, that's why I started spiritual cardio, is because we are in survival mode. We don't even know that we're doing that. We don't know that we become our own abusers by silencing the inner child, by drowning her through some sort of addiction, or silencing her because we just like suppressing, right? Suppressing her is silencing her. That's what I did for many years. And in speaking our truth and doing the self inquiry, we're finally giving her a chance to be seen and heard. Sometimes I'm like in awe that I'm teaching this stuff. Like it blows my mind that like we go through life in like this dissociated self-loathing. We don't know that we're in that, but we're doing it, right? And so I'm just so glad that you took the program and you were able to get something out of it. that really helped you grow and become the woman that you're meant to be?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I've read journal entries. I think at the beginning of this year, I was reading through my journal entries because probably when I started the program, when I was doing the program, that was a really tough time in my life. And things started to get better as time continued on. And then looking back, realizing how much growth and how much has changed. And I remember writing down manifesting different things that I wanted. And a lot of those have come true. A lot of those things that I had wished for myself have have happened now. It's amazing. It's
That's
just like
beautiful.
putting in
And
all
that's
the
because
work.
yeah, and that's because you liberated your energy, right? Like the energy that we use to suppress our insecurities. When you do the work on yourself, then you are transforming that energy and it is being redirected now because you're no longer suppressing, right? And you use that now towards creativity, towards self love. It goes towards confidence, self esteem. And what are you going to do with that? Well, you're going to go out and pursue things that you want to do. You're in alignment with your values and like your heart's innermost desires. And so then you take these little baby steps towards that.
Hey ladies, are you craving transformation and personal growth? Are you ready to get radically honest with yourself and own your story? Are you ready to build confidence so that you can manifest your goals? If so, then this may be just what you're looking for. Spiritual Cardio is a course in transformational wisdom that combines traditional spiritual practices with real life experience. At Spiritual Cardio, we heal in community where we can be vulnerable and raw. Because when one woman speaks her truth, she begins to heal, and she opens the door for another woman to speak hers. At Spiritual Cardio, every lesson is designed with you in mind. That includes practical tools with relatable real-life examples. At Spiritual Cardio, we help identify and release energetic blocks so that you can become the architect of your destiny. Head over to valeriezapeta.com to read the powerful testimonials from previous clients and register for an upcoming session. Group and one-on-one coaching is available. All sessions are live and in real time. Now back to the show.
So I would love to know like what's manifested and how your life has changed since doing the program.
Yeah. So I was going through a lot of depression and anxiety at the time. And I think a lot of that was just feeling really isolated. So I was able to open up to a lot of my friends. I was able to talk to some of them about a lot of childhood issues and trauma. And that was really liberating to be able to talk to them about that. And some of them also shared similar issues, some things that we had in common. And just being able to know I wasn't the only one going through that. And then from there, I had been unhappy with my job, just sort of, I felt unfulfilled with it for a while. And so I was able to get a new job. I had multiple job offers before I accepted the one that I have now. And so I know that was a big thing. I think I didn't have a lot of my own ability to tell myself I was doing great. So I got that external validation. So I'd want it from work or I'd want it from other people to say, you're good and you're enough. And I just sought that on the outside. And so then when I felt like work was not challenging or fulfilling, I was scared for a long time to try to change that. But I was able to do that. And I was able to have multiple job offers and have a job that I do feel like is challenging and more enjoyable than my last one was. And then probably the biggest change was moving back, being closer to my family. And even then, there are still things that came up when I moved back, but I was able to handle it. And I was able to talk to my mom about some issues during childhood and some things we were able to talk about and some things she just wasn't ready for. But that was okay. I was understanding because I've been doing a lot of work. It doesn't mean that she's been doing the same amount of work. And that was a hard part initially where I was like, well, I've been in therapy and I've been doing these things and I've been doing all this self inquiry. And now I'm ready to talk to her and address all of these issues.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, she's not there.
Yeah. She hasn't been doing the work you
No,
have.
right. And so we were able to talk about some things. And then some, I just know that if she's ready at some point, I'll be available. And if not, I'm working on accepting. And I think one of the other biggest things that has happened is being able to accept my parents in the phase of life they are now. They are different people now. I'm an adult now. We're different people now, and not holding on to so much of that anger. Some of the things they did, because they are different people. I don't know if they would make the same decisions they would now if presented with the same issue. I think they have grown and they've gone through different experiences. And so really being able to spend time and appreciate them now and not hold
Yeah.
on to so much of that anger from before.
Taking the time to profoundly understand ourselves gives us the wisdom to be better at understanding other people. But first, it starts with us. How can we be patient with the world if we're not patient with ourselves? We have to look at ourselves and take the time to put the pieces of the puzzle back together to deeply understand ourselves. And then we can understand others and be like, okay, we recognize that they're on their own journey, right? They're not on our journey. They're on their own journey.
Yeah. When I started, I just thought, well, if my mom just apologizes to me, everything's going to be fixed. All of these years of my issues everything's going to go away. And then the further along I got, like, oh, it's very complicated. And a lot of it I was being mean to my own self. And I was doing a lot of those things that maybe she did when I was a child. And then I became that mean person to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the way I describe it is we become our own abusers. And then at some point, we have to recognize it's almost like the universe or God holds a mirror up to our life and is like, you're the problem. Like, you have to work on you. Your mom isn't coming to save you. The person that abused you at the age of 5 or 6 is not coming to save you. Like, it's up to you to do the work and rescue yourself. And then you have the capacity emotionally now to deal with the people in your life that you love and want to be there for, like your mom, for example, right? Now you can hold space for her. I'm not saying be a doormat, because this work is not about being a doormat,
Right.
but it's not about that. But it is about recognizing that we can now have respect for ourselves, and we're confident enough now because we've taken the time to understand ourselves and love ourselves in this way where we can now have a boundary. Whereas before, we didn't have the confidence because that shame just kept us freaking stuck. And we just felt like we didn't deserve better.
Right. Exactly. Or I just would kept thinking, well, if I'm nice or if I do all of these things, she'll apologize and everything will be fine and everything will just magically fix itself. Like I'll get all the validation I need from everyone else outside of me. And in the inside, I'm going to feel good. And I tried that for years and that never worked.
Yeah, because it's not really about the apology. It's like the internal work that needs to get done. We so desperately want to be seen and heard by our parents, but like, have you taken the time to be seen and heard by, like, from yourself? Have you done the work yourself? Have you taken the time to be seen and heard as the adult self to the childhood self? Because that's really what you're craving. And there will come a time when you will find the right time, the right place to have that conversation with your parents, and they might not be ready.
Right.
And you're going to have to be okay with that. I had a conversation with my dad about how that whole situation went down when I was 5 and how he didn't let my mom call the cops. I don't know if you remember the story.
Yeah.
You do? So I had a conversation with him a couple of years ago where I finally dismantled the shame enough to confront him and ask him, like, why did you handle things that way? Like, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you protect me? Like, why? The thing is that prior to that conversation, I held so much shame and resentment where, like, I didn't have the courage to ask him that. But doing this work finally got me to a place where I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to have that conversation. I don't know if he's ready, but I'm going to ask him. And I did. And it's interesting because he tried to gaslight a little bit, like, no, that's not how things happen. And I'm like, Dad, I was 5. I remember. And so he tried to gaslight a little bit because he didn't want to take accountability. Luckily, his wife was in the room and she was like, you need to stop. Your daughter is telling you something that happened to her, and you need to acknowledge what she's telling you. Stop denying it. And it's almost like she gave him permission to be honest because I guess he didn't want to maybe admit it in front of her or didn't even want to admit it to me or to himself that's how he handled things. But in that moment, I'm glad she was there because she gave him permission just to like be honest. When she did that, then his response was just he broke down and he got on his knees and started asking me for forgiveness.
Wow.
And he was crying. And that moment for me was so healing because that's like one, I wanted to know why he reacted that way. Like, what did you see in your childhood that would make you react that way? You know, like maybe he was sexually abused, or maybe like, I just don't know because I'd never asked him. And then, secondly, I mean, he went above and beyond. I just thought he was going to apologize, but he like asked me to forgive. He got on his knees and asked me to forgive him. It was a really pivotal moment in my relationship with him because our relationship since that conversation has gotten so much better.
That's amazing.
It's vulnerability, you know, like it takes courage to ask our parents these burning questions. We don't know how they're going to react. And that's a chance that at some point, because we've taken the time to grow and cultivate so much self love within ourselves, that we are courageous enough to take a chance and ask. And we don't know what the response is going to be, but it might just freaking change everything. It might, you know? The courage to ask is a result of all this work. And so I'm glad that you got to the point where you're like, okay, like I want to confront this stuff
Hmm.
with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have had a lot more open conversations with my parents now. And yeah, sometimes they're not ready to talk about them. I think they have a lot of shame about what happened. And there have been times when I felt like, especially my mom did gaslight me and just, that's not the way things happened. You're misremembering. And I just realized I think it's just she has a lot of shame. And so what I've done is I've just tell her like, this is my experience. This is how it happened for me. And I want to share that with you. And then at this point, I don't expect any apology. I don't expect anything. But I just know for me, it's really helpful for me to share these things because then they don't live in my head. And when they say in my head, they live with the shame and the anxiety and all these things just
Yeah,
spiral together. And when they're on the outside, there's just, they're not as scary anymore.
absolutely. And I can relate. My mom is a whole other conversation. So, I've gotten the gaslighting from her. We have not had a healing conversation, unfortunately. I think that maybe there's a lot of shame with her, maybe the emotional capacity to hold space and just take accountability and have some humility around that conversation is just not available right now, and I'm not sure if it ever will be.
Yeah, I mean, and the closest my mom has gotten to accepting or taking some responsibility is she's told me, I know you've put in a lot of work on yourself. I know that you're doing all these things. And she said, I've just never had that opportunity. I've never had a chance to really work on myself. She said, I've always been busy and I've always had a lot of things to do. And she was like, you have all of these privileges and all these other advantages that I've never had.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes complete sense. And the fact that she owned up to that, I think is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember just a few, maybe last year was the first time, and as an adult or any point that I remember her apologizing to me. She said something and she was mean and she was angry in the moment. And the next day she called and she apologized and told me that's where some of that came up. She said, I haven't had the chance to really think about some of my actions. I haven't had the chance to go to therapy or do some of the healing work that you had. She was like, I've always had to work really hard to support you and to support myself. And she did apologize. And I had never expected that to happen.
Wow. Well, good.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
glad.
yeah. And even if that had never happened, I would still be okay. That was really good to really affirm some of the things. Okay, I'm opening up. Our relationship is getting better.
Yeah. Yeah, because for her or like for my mom, it's like baby steps, right? Like what are they willing
Yeah,
to share? Because just as like in spiritual cardio, we say you can share as much or as little as you want, right? Same goes for our parents. Like they're going to go at their own pace with whatever they feel comfortable with because therapy wasn't available to them. Like it's a different generation. They just don't see the value of therapy the way we do. It's just a
right.
different generation.
Yeah, and I don't think she would ever feel comfortable really opening up to her friends, or she would feel a lot of shame and embarrassment that she couldn't figure this out on her own.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then let alone open up to a therapist, like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
stranger.
right. So I'm like, she's never had the opportunity to really experience that. So
Yeah,
it's baby steps. Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so the last question would be if you were to recommend spiritual cardio to a friend, what would you say?
Oh, I have. I have recommended to a few friends. um, so I so I've recommended to two of my Latina friends, and I've told them that it's a safe space where you are in community with people who are similar to you, and you have the opportunity to explore any issues that you feel like you're ready to address. If you're ready to deep dive into self-healing, if you're ready to just be in a community and be vulnerable, I think it's a great space to whatever part of your healing journey you're on. It's just a good place to address a lot of those things in a community, in a safe space.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for recommending spiritual cardio to your friends.
Yeah, and it is really accessible because you are virtual, and I see you have some in-person ones now, but I was like, yeah, the virtual part really does help, so you can join from wherever.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can reach like if they have questions or if the schedule doesn't work for them, if do your friends that you've recommended it to, do they know each other? The reason why I asked that is because I could do spiritual are they on the East Coast?
One's on the West Coast and one's on the East Coast.
Have them feel free to reach out to me and it because if the current schedule doesn't work for them and I'm getting enough interest, then I can put together like a whole new group for that
Okay.
schedule that would work for them. So that way they get the group rate and then they get to transform their lives.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this was the first time that I felt like healing in community. And I know people have talked about those things, but I had never really experienced it myself. And this was the first time where it's like, I don't need to add extra information about my culture or my family or why my parents, maybe why my mom was so blunt. Like, that was just part of, that's just who she is. And that's some of that is cultural. But it was the first time where I felt like people get me and I don't have to do the extra explanation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what's your ethnicity again?
Mexican.
I think the I think I get like the calm side from my Mexican dad. And then I get the fire from my mom. She's Colombian.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, sometimes like if people don't understand, it's hard to then open up and then explain to them all of these other things about, okay, well, I had these conversations in Spanish, but I also like, I didn't feel like we could turn to the police or we couldn't do these things. Or I don't know. It's just like all of these extra layers of like extra shame. And I don't know. It's just hard.
absolutely. I completely understand. And then throughout the program too, it's a lot of Spanglish, right? Because there's
Yeah.
in describing things like it you're more concise and descriptive in Spanish.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, and for me, a lot of it was like childhood things that happened. And I don't know, I didn't learn some of that language until I was older about okay, this is what happened and this is how to talk about it. Yeah, there was just a lot of shame around like abuse and trauma, and feeling like healing in community was just very, very transformative.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so, so, so much for doing this. I'm going to send you some spiritual cardio goodies. So
Oh, thank
offline,
you.
if yeah, if you can just send me like your shipping address, I'll drop some stuff in the mail in the next few days for you. I just feel so grateful that you took the time to do this. And I guess the last question is for anybody listening, this is going on to the podcast. So for anybody listening, is there any final thoughts or anything you want to say about spiritual cardio for anybody who might be interested?
Um, I would say if anyone is, I don't know, questioning or thinking it might be really difficult, I feel like you're a great facilitator and you are really good at helping people open up and finding ways to connect with people. So if I went in thinking like, oh, what if like I feel really embarrassed or everyone is just like very different from me, I felt like you were really good at finding things that we all had in common. And it was a really safe space, but also, yeah, I felt very much in community.
Yay.
So it was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad we got to reconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been watching you throughout the just ever since you took the program and we exchanged social medias. I've been watching you and I see that you are doing amazing. You look happy. You look very happy.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Spiritual Cardio Podcast. If you're ready to transform your life and become the best version of yourself, sign up for an upcoming group session today at valeriezapeta.com. And if you'd like to support the show, there's several ways you can help. You can share the show with a few friends, follow at Spiritual Cardio on social media, make sure you're subscribed to the show on your favorite podcast platform, and you can donate to the show via valeriezapeta.com. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Hey, thank you for showing up and spending some time with me. If you loved this episode, please make sure to subscribe. And for exclusive content, you can sign up for my newsletter at valeriezapeta.com. I'll see you guys at the next show.